Hello. In this short lecture, we're going to talk a little bit about defensiveness in communication. So, one of the things that leads to a defensive reaction from people is what we call face threatening. And face threatening acts are acts that threaten the image that others want to present to the world. So when we talk about face, you've probably heard about this term before. So people say, "I wanted to save face," right? So when they say they want to save face, they're using the term face to as in terms of the image that they want to present. So we all know that we present ourselves in different ways in different situations. So how you present yourself when you go to the bar, for example, is different than how you present yourself when you go to class or how you present yourself when you go to church. And so each time you decide on how you're going to present yourself, this is your face, right? This is the image that you are trying to present. And so when someone confronts you with a face-threatening act, a message that threatens this image, you're likely to resist that message, right? And so defensiveness is the process of protecting your presenting self or your face. Now, good communicators, people who are effective at communicating, protect others' face needs as well as their own. Now, usually if we were in class, I'd ask you, how do you think people do this, and can you think of examples? And why is this done? So I'll answer these questions for myself, since you aren't here to help me. So some of the ways that we help people preserve their face, we ask questions sometimes where we already know the answers, for example, just so that other people will feel good about things, right? Or we'll ask questions in a way that's respectful, right? Possibly threatening questions that are still respectful, in such a way as to help people still feel good about themselves, right? Indeed, at other times, we won't mention things that might embarrass people, right? So I have, for example, taught an entire class once in front of a lecture hall filled with 150 students who didn't tell me that I had baby vomit all down the back of my shirt, right? This was right after one of my kids was born. And I asked one of the students afterwards, I was like, man, I kept smelling something. Like, why didn't you tell? I know it's gross. But I was like, why didn't you tell me? And she said, I thought I'd embarrass you in front of everyone. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of everyone by telling you. So that's an example of how sometimes we just don't even send messages so that we can help people maintain their face, right? So as not to embarrass them. And we do that because we don't want to upset people, right? We don't want to make them feel bad about themselves, right? Because that can help future communication. Now, we've done a fair amount of study in ways to prevent defensiveness. And indeed, a social scientist by the name of Jack Gibb came up with a list of 6 kinds of defense-arousing communication, and correspondingly 6 types of behaviors that lessen defensiveness by demonstrating respect, right? So these are the ones that encourage over here defensive behaviors, and these are the ones that can be seen as supportive, right? So evaluating people, right? So evaluating their behavior, passing judgment on their behavior can be threatening to people. To avoid that, instead, you might want to describe their behavior to them, right? So when you're describing their behavior, you're not saying that it's good or bad. You're merely making an observation and telling people what you've seen. And sometimes this can send the message like, hey, you might want to think about doing this a different way, without telling them that what they did was wrong, right? With regard to control, right? Now, with control, this is a tricky one. This is where you try and control what people do, solve problems for them, right? Which implies that they're incapable of doing some of these things themselves. So instead, you might want to help them orient themselves to the problem. So instead of solving the problem for them, give them a different way of looking at it. Strategy, right, is sort of similar. So with strategy, it appears that we're dealing with someone because we have a strategy worked out already in how to deal with them. Whereas if we appear spontaneous, it doesn't appear that we might have ulterior motives. If we approach someone's concerns with neutrality, so if someone comes to us with a concern and we act as if their concern isn't good or bad, it can make them feel defensive. But if we address them with empathy, oh man, I'm really sorry that happened to you, right? That helps be supportive. Obviously, dealing with people from a position of superiority can make them defensive. If you act like you're better than they are, it's better to address them from an equal position. And then sometimes when we deal with people and we act very certain about things, it implies that we're better than them, right? Oh, well, you don't need to worry about that because, right, and we act like we know everything about a situation. It's better to be provisional about things. So in other words, sort of let people know, well, yeah, in that situation, maybe you're right kind of thing, right? So these are ways, again, of communicating that are supportive and less likely to generate defensive behaviors. So, I talked about each one a little bit, so let's dig into them a little bit more. So with evaluation, again, you're judging, right? So these are judgments that indicate a lack of regard. And generally they include a lot of you language. You know what your problem is? You blah, 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 right? That's an evaluation. The description, on the hand, focuses on the speaker's thoughts and feelings rather than judging the other person. So, for example, instead of saying, you're a slob, you can say, I feel really overwhelmed when I have to clean the house by myself. You see the difference there, right? Now, with control versus problem orientation, controlling communication is when you seem to impose a solution on the other person with little regard for their needs or interests. That's I know what's best for you, so you need to do it. Now, with problem orientation, instead of telling the person the solution, right, you sort of help them orient themselves to the problem and help them find a solution that satisfies both your needs and theirs, right? And so this sort of approach is characterized by we language, right? So it's more you're together in this thing than it's the other person's problem, if that makes sense. Now, with strategy, people sometimes think that we have ulterior motives when we deal with them, right? That we are trying to manipulate them, that we're trying to get them to do something for us. With spontaneity, it seems like you're being honest and that you're not manipulating them. It seems like everything's just coming along spontaneously, right? Hence the term. And so that suggests that you don't have a secret kind of agenda. Now, a neutral attitude, whoops, I made a typo there, sorry about that. A neutral attitude is disconfirming because it implies that you're not concerned with the welfare of the other person, right? Like you're neutral about their troubles. Now, instead, you might want to try using empathy, right? Accepting the other's feelings and trying to put yourself in their shoes. Now, it is important to realize as well that you don't have to agree with someone to empathize with them. So, for example, you might a friend might come to you and say, "Oh, I got pregnant. I didn't mean to, and now I have to get an abortion." Well, you might be against abortion, but you can still empathize with the person, even though you don't like their choices, right? You can still say, "Oh, that's a really tough situation. I'm sorry you're in that," right? And you can still express empathy. You don't have to agree with the person in order to do that. Messages that say I'm better than you are always bad. That'll always make the other person feel disconfirmed. And so instead you want to deal with people as an equal instead of as their superior. Now with certainty, generally speaking, people who think that their own opinions are always right tend to disregard the opinions of others. And this is disconfirming, right? So instead, you might want to approach this whole thing from the position of provisionalism. So you might have a strong opinion, but you're willing to acknowledge that you don't know everything, right? And you might change your stance if the other person's viewpoint seems more reasonable. All right, so that's it for this short lecture. Next time we'll talk more about saving face. Thanks for checking this out.